All right, it is official now. Emergency evacuations happening in Afghanistan have now stopped. American troops have officially withdrawn from the airport in Kabul. More than 100,000 people have been airlifted to safety over just 2 weeks. One of those flights over the course of the weekend was the result of a daring operation by Ukraine. It was that country's troops which helped rescue 19 Afghans destined for Canada, that according to a report from the Globe and Mail. Now, Roman Waschuk served as Canada's ambassador to Ukraine from 2014 to 2019 and is now a member of the board of directors at the Canada-Ukraine Foundation. Mr. Waschuk joins us this afternoon. Sir, thank you very much. I wonder if you could just walk us through what exactly Ukrainian forces did. This involved them going outside of the airport to collect people.
That's right. Ukrainian military intelligence special forces landed at Kabul airport, and Ukraine is a country with significant strategic lift capabilities. And they then went out on foot. So no armored cars, none of that, to look for the minibuses with the interpreters. And I think one was a interpreter and family who had worked for the Globe and Mail. The other one was one who had actually worked for Canadian special forces in Afghanistan. They had photo IDs of each other, what the license plates were, and I think the encounter was the Ukrainians saying, "We're Ukraine," and the people in the van saying, "We're going to Canada." And then they guided them through the crowds. And this was shortly after, in fact, the explosion. So actually at a very perilous time in and around the airport.
I mean, the significant thing here is that they went outside of the airport. And certainly this has been a multinational effort where you've seen people going to the United States, going off on Qatari aircraft. You've seen people going to Canada, going off on American aircraft. But it is much more rare to see forces going out into the community, particularly more recently. Why is it that Ukraine seemed to be doing that while other countries were not? And although, I know Canada said that they were operating outside the wire of the airport, we didn't actually see something like this.
Well, I think the Ukrainians have for 7 years been fighting a homeland defense war, and that helps shift your risk tolerance into being a bit more forward leaning. They've been, unfortunately, had a lot of real-time combat experience, including special forces, and so we're more ready to undertake this sort of mission. I think it's also interesting. I mean, Mark McKinnon, who wrote the story, was also one of the guys who was behind this effort. He had reported from both Ukraine and Afghanistan over the past decade, and he made the connection that a country with strategic lift and a country with battle-hardened forces might be able to pull this off.
Yeah, and certainly more consideration of what else Ukraine might do. Now, the airport is seemingly back in the hands of the Taliban now that the Americans have officially left earlier this afternoon. And I should just say in full disclosure to the audience that I have been part of some of the larger media efforts to get people who worked with our various organizations at least identified to government to aid them in getting out. But I wonder about the role of Ukraine, Mr. Waschuk, going forward. You note that it has such strategic lift capability. There is now talk about whether that capability, those aircraft essentially could be used to help people who escape to other countries to get onwards.
That's certainly possible. I think this effort went through Islamabad in terms of a staging point. But it's also interesting that the Taliban are in discussion with the Turks on potentially running Kabul airport, and Ukraine has a well-developed relationship with Turkey. So I could see potential there without knowing any of the details at this point. But certainly, also the fact that Canadian forces have been in Ukraine helping train the Ukrainians for the past 6 years has meant that there's a high degree of respect and appreciation for Canada. And so when requests come in from Canadians, they're treated, I would say, with greater openness than from many other countries.
Okay, so walk me through this for a moment. And I know we're dealing not quite with hypotheticals, but with things that we don't know entirely the answers to. Is there a scenario that you could see that someone who worked for the Canadian Armed Forces during the course of our mission there and now wants to get out of Afghanistan, has not been able to this point, that they could conceivably get on a Ukrainian aircraft if they escape to Pakistan, or if the airport in Kabul is reopened, that conceivably the Turkish, who would maybe be involved in that, could then allow the Ukrainians to land. And because Canada has this relationship with the government of Ukraine, that it might be easier to basically get our people on their planes and to Canada.
That is, at this point, totally speculative. And, I was just involved in the front end of setting up some of these connections. So, I wouldn't exclude either scenario, but I have no information about them being, worked on at this point.
And walk me through what your role was. Was it to introduce people?
It was basically introduce people. It's, again, there aren't that many senior Canadian foreign correspondents around, so you value them greatly. And certainly when you hear from them, you want to be helpful in a life and death situation like this. And so, I've certainly, through connections with the Ukrainian embassy here and then with the presidential administration in Ukraine, put people in direct contact, and they basically took it from there.
And there you have it. An escape flight made good just on Friday. Mr. Waschuk, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.